You can't just leave them in the storm. They're your blood, Vivienne. They're your children. Jordan's voice cracked over the deafening roar of the midnight thunder, her rain-soaked clothes clinging to her shivering frame. The Luna didn't even pause in her stride toward the idling black SUV. She adjusted the collar of her designer trench coat, her pristine stilettos clicking sharply against the wet pavement. They are weak, Jordan. Born too small. Too fragile. I am the queen of the Blackwood Summit. I don't nurse runts. Silas will kill you, Jordan breathed, dropping to her knees on the frozen asphalt, pulling the two wailing, ice-cold bundles against her chest. Vivienne offered a cruel, painted smile through the window glass. Let him try. He's better off without them. And if you're so fond of the little mistakes, Omega, you keep them. The tires screeched, leaving Jordan alone in the freezing rain with the Alpha King's abandoned heirs. The Blackwood Summit was less a pack house, and more a modern fortress of glass, steel, and ancient mahogany, nestled high in the unforgiving peaks of the Cascades. To be an Omega here was to be invisible. Jordan knew the rules intimately. Keep your head down. Scrub the blood from the training room mats. Keep the kitchen stocked. And never, ever look an alpha in the eye. At 23, Jordan had perfected the art of blending into the shadows. She wasn't weak. No wolf who survived the brutal winters at the bottom of the hierarchy could be called weak, but she was submissive by nature. Her wolf a quiet, gentle spirit that craved peace over power. But peace was the last thing the storm brought that Tuesday night. The rain had been falling in sheets, a torrential downpour that threatened to wash the mountain away. Jordan had been doing her final rounds, locking the heavy iron gates of the estate's outer gardens, when she heard it. A sound so thin and reedy she initially mistook it for a dying bird. It was a mewling, desperate cry that sent an immediate, visceral spike of adrenaline straight into her veins. Her boots sloshed through the mud as she abandoned her lantern, following the sound toward the stone archway of the private royal driveway. That was where she had found them. 2 woven baskets, utterly saturated with freezing rain, shoved carelessly beneath the meager shelter of a rhododendron bush. Inside were Leo and Maya, the Alpha King's newborn twins. They were barely a week old, their tiny bodies shivering so violently it looked like they were having seizures. Their lips were a terrifying shade of blue. Jordan hadn't thought. She had simply reacted, tearing off her own thick wool sweater and wrapping it around the freezing infants, pressing them to the bare skin of her chest to transfer whatever body heat she had left. Then came the confrontation with Vivienne, the Luna's cold departure, and the terrifying realization that Jordan was now standing alone in the dark with the most precious, vulnerable members of the pack. I have to get them inside, she thought, panic tightening her throat. They're dying. She couldn't take them to the clinic. The pack doctor was a staunch loyalist to Vivienne's family. If Vivienne wanted these pups to quietly pass away in the cold to spare her the embarrassment of weak heirs, the doctor might just turn a blind eye, operating purely on instinct. Jordan bypassed the main quarters and sprinted toward the servants' wing. Her lungs burned with the icy air, her legs aching as she cradled the pups fiercely against her collarbone. She kicked open the door to her cramped, basement-level room, the meager heat of the radiator hitting her like a physical blow. Okay, I've got you. I'm here, she chanted, her voice trembling as she laid the bundles on her narrow, scratchy mattress. She worked with frantic precision. She stripped the wet blankets away, her heart breaking at the sight of their translucent, mottled skin. They were so small, too small for alpha bloodlines. Maya's breathing was a shallow, rattling gasp, and Leo had stopped crying altogether, his eyes closed in a terrifying lethargy. Jordan grabbed her only luxury, a thick, plush, heated blanket she'd saved up for months to buy, and plugged it in, cranking it to the highest setting. She drew a basin of warm water, using soft cotton cloths to gently massage their limbs, trying to stimulate the blood flow. Don't give up, she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek and landing on Leo's pale forehead. Your father is the king. You have the blood of warriors. Fight. Please, fight. She spent the next 3 hours in pure agony. She mixed a crude formula from goat's milk and nutrient powder she kept for the strays, using a tiny dropper to force the liquid into their mouths. She hummed an old, forgotten lullaby, wrapping her arms around them, and letting her wolf's aura a soft, comforting scent of rain-washed pine and warm vanilla blanket the room. It was a known fact that Omegas had naturally soothing auras, meant to calm pack tensions. But Jordan poured every ounce of her soul into projecting strength, warmth, and maternal protection into the two fading lives. Around 3 a.m., the miracle happened. Maya's skin flushed from deathly blue to a soft, healthy pink. She let out a loud, demanding wail, her tiny fists punching the air. A moment later, Leo stirred, his golden eyes fluttering open as he rooted blindly against Jordan's collarbone for warmth. Jordan collapsed back against the headboard, a sob of sheer relief tearing from her throat. They were going to live. She pulled them securely against her chest, exhaustion finally dragging her under. She didn't know that 3 floors above her, hell was breaking loose. Silas Vance, the Alpha King of the Western Territories, was a man forged in violence and sustained by ironclad discipline. Standing 6'4" with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of 3,000 shifters, he commanded a room simply by breathing in it. His eyes were a piercing, luminescent amber, and his presence carried the heavy, suffocating scent of ozone and dark cedar, the smell of an impending thunderstorm. He had returned from a week-long border dispute, deeply exhausted, craving only a hot shower, a stiff drink, and to look upon his newborn heirs. His marriage to Vivienne had been a strategic alliance, brokered by the elders to unite 2 warring factions. There was no love between them, only a cold, calculated arrangement. But the pups were his. They were the legacy he had bled for. When Silas pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the royal nursery, expecting the quiet hum of the night nurse and the scent of baby powder, he found only chaos. The cribs were empty. The window was open, rain lashing against the imported silk curtains. The night nurse was unconscious on the floor, a lump forming on the back of her head, and the scent of Vivienne's sickly sweet roses and sharp metallic ambition was fading toward the exit. Silas's roar shook the very foundations of the Blackwood estate. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated alpha fury, a sonic boom that woke every wolf within a 5-mile radius. Windows rattled in their frames. Within seconds, his beta, Marcus, was in the room, his eyes wide with horror. Alpha? The borders are secure? What? Where are my children? Silas bellowed, his claws extending, slicing through the fine leather of his gloves. His wolf was clawing at his mind, rabid with the instinct to hunt, to kill, to tear apart whoever had touched his blood. The Luna's vehicle left the perimeter an hour ago, Marcus reported, his voice shaking. We thought she was taking them to the secondary estate. Silas didn't wait. He dropped to his knees, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled deeply, parsing through the scents of the room. He smelled Vivienne's betrayal. He smelled the nurse's fear, but beneath it, he caught the faint, terrified scent of the pups, moving not toward the front gates, but deeper into the estate. They didn't leave in the car. His wolf snarled. She left them behind. Silas tracked the scent like a bloodhound. He ignored the frantic questions of his guards, sprinting down the grand staircases, his boots echoing like gunshots. The scent led him out into the freezing rain, toward the garden archway. There, he found the crushed rhododendron bush. He found a discarded, soaked designer scarf belonging to his wife, and he found the unmistakable scent of a pack Omega, layered thickly over the fading, metallic scent of his freezing pups. His eyes turned entirely gold. An Omega had taken them. Silas followed the trail with lethal precision. It led him around the back of the kitchens, down a dark, concrete stairwell, and stopped at a battered wooden door in the servants' quarters. The scent of pine and vanilla was overwhelming here, masking the scent of the babies entirely. Silas didn't bother with the handle. He kicked the door with enough force to splinter the wood off its hinges. The door slammed against the interior wall with a deafening crash. "Where are they?" he roared, stepping into the cramped, dimly lit room, fully prepared to rip the throat out of whoever stood inside. But the sight before him froze the blood in his veins and brought his raging wolf to a screeching, unprecedented halt. There, sitting up against the headboard of a miserable, tiny bed, was a young woman. She had dark circles under her wide, terrified brown eyes. Her damp hair clung to her pale cheeks. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt, completely exposed, but pressed tightly to her bare chest. Wrapped securely in a thick heated blanket were Leo and Maya. Both pups were fast asleep, their breathing steady, their skin flushed with warmth. Jordan froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The Alpha King was standing in her bedroom, looking like a god of war who had come to exact vengeance. The sheer suffocating weight of his aura forced her chin down in an instinctual show of submission, but she did not loosen her grip on the babies. "They're safe," Jordan choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Alpha, please. They're safe." They were freezing. She left them in the rain. Silas stared at her. His chest heaved as the adrenaline slowly morphed into shock. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He approached the bed as if approaching a skittish deer. He fell to his knees beside the mattress, his massive, scarred hands reaching out. Jordan flinched but allowed him to peel back the edge of the blanket. Silas let out a ragged, broken breath as his thumb brushed over Leo's warm cheek. He leaned in, burying his face in the blanket, inhaling the scent of his children. They smelled of milk, rain, and the deep, intoxicatingly calming scent of vanilla and pine. Silas slowly lifted his head, his golden eyes locking onto Jordan's brown ones. For a fraction of a second, a spark hot, electric, and terrifyingly familiar snapped between them. Silas's wolf, normally a beast of rage and dominance, suddenly let out a low, content rumble in his mind. Safe. She made them safe. "Who are you?" Silas demanded, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that sent a shiver down Jordan's spine. "J. Jordan, Alpha. I work in the kitchens." Silas looked at the cramped room, the peeling paint, and then at the fierce, protective way this tiny Omega was clutching his heirs. Vivienne, his Luna, his equal in status, had left them to die. This Omega, the lowest-ranking member of his pack, had risked his wrath to save them. "Pack your things," Silas commanded, rising to his full, towering height. Jordan's breath hitched. "Alpha, please. I didn't mean to steal them. I was just trying to warm them. You aren't being punished." "Jordan," Silas interrupted, his tone brokering no argument. He reached down, effortlessly scooping up the bundle of blankets containing his children, holding them against his broad chest. "You are moving to the royal wing. My pups need a caretaker. And it seems they have already chosen one." The transition from the basement to the royal wing gave Jordan severe emotional whiplash. She was placed in a suite adjoining the nursery. It was larger than her entire childhood home, boasting floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the misty valley, a king-sized bed draped in Egyptian cotton, and a private bathroom with a marble soaking tub. But to Jordan, it felt like a beautiful, gilded cage. For the first 3 days, the estate was in an uproar. The news of the Luna's abandonment spread like wildfire, carefully managed by Silas's beta to prevent total panic. Officially, Vivienne was on a health retreat. Unofficially, the highest-ranking warriors were scouring the continent, not to bring her back, but to ensure she wasn't raising an army with a rival Alpha. Through it all, Jordan remained sequestered in the nursery. She quickly realized that Silas trusted no one else with the twins. He dismissed the royal nannies, fired the pack doctor, and brought in an independent human pediatrician bound by a $1 million NDA to check on the pups. When the doctor confirmed that Jordan's quick actions had saved them from severe hypothermia, Silas's demeanor toward her shifted from commanding to intensely observant. It was late on the 4th night. The nursery was bathed in the soft amber glow of a salt lamp. Jordan was rocking in a plush glider, holding a crying Maya to her chest. The pup was colicky, her tiny face scrunched up in discomfort. Jordan was softly humming, rubbing circles on the infant's back, her own vanilla pine scent flaring to soothe the baby. The door creaked open. Silas stepped in, still wearing his tailored suit from a day of brutal council meetings. His tie loosened, his jaw tight with exhaustion. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, his massive frame dwarfing the delicate furniture of the nursery, and stood beside the glider, watching Jordan. "She has a stomachache," Jordan whispered, acutely aware of the heat radiating off the Alpha King. She kept her eyes on the baby, terrified that if she looked at him, he would see the illicit, fluttering attraction growing in her chest. "Give her to me," Silas said softly. Jordan hesitated, then carefully transferred the crying infant into her father's arms. Silas held Maya awkwardly at first, afraid his calloused hands might break her, but as he pressed the pup to his chest, right over his heart, Maya's cries hitched. "She likes your heartbeat," Jordan observed softly, offering a tentative smile. It's strong. Silas looked down at the now quieting pup, a look of profound, vulnerable sorrow crossing his harsh features. I failed them. I chose a mate based on bloodlines and power. And I brought a monster into their lives. Jordan was stunned. Alphas did not confess weakness. Kings certainly did not confess failure to Omegas. The intimacy of the admission hung heavy in the quiet room. You didn't know, Jordan said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. And you're here now. You're holding her. That's what makes a parent. Alpha. Not the bloodline, the staying. Silas's amber eyes snapped up to meet hers. The intensity in his gaze was a physical weight. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly thin, charged with static electricity. His wolf was pressing against the forefront of his mind, practically purring at the sight of the Omega. Silas stepped closer, closing the distance between them. He leaned down slightly, inhaling deeply. You smell peaceful, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. Since Vivienne left, this room is the only place in the territory where I can breathe. Jordan swallowed hard, her pulse hammering in her throat. It's my Omega nature, Alpha. We are meant to pacify. Don't call me Alpha in this room, Silas commanded gently, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before snapping back to her eyes. Call me Silas. I can't do that, sir. It's against the rules. Silas reached out with his free hand, his knuckles lightly grazing the curve of her cheek. The touch sent a jolt of fire straight to Jordan's core. I am the king, Jordan. I make the rules. And in this room, you are not an Omega. You are the savior of my blood. You are my equal. He pulled his hand back, looking almost shocked by his own actions, and quickly turned back to the crib to lay Maya down. But as he walked out of the nursery that night, Jordan knew the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. A dangerous, beautiful line had been crossed, and there was no going back to the basement. 2 weeks passed. The twins, under Jordan's meticulous care, began to thrive. They gained weight. Their golden eyes grew bright and alert, and their cries turned from weak mules to demanding, healthy wails. But outside the nursery, the political landscape of the Blackwood pack was deteriorating rapidly. Jordan heard the whispers from the maids who came to clean the royal wing. The pack elders were growing restless. A pack without a Luna was considered unstable, a target for rival factions. They were demanding Silas take a new mate, immediately. They had even begun parading high-born alpha females from neighboring territories through the estate under the guise of diplomatic visits. One afternoon, Jordan decided to take the twins for a walk in the indoor botanical gardens. She secured them in a double stroller, grateful to be out of the nursery for a few hours. The gardens were a massive, glass-domed paradise of exotic plants and running waterfalls. As she pushed the stroller through a dense archway of hanging orchids, she heard voices echoing from the nearby courtyard. Cannot sustain this, Silas. The northern pack is sensing weakness. The voice belonged to Elder Thorn, a wizened, cruel-faced wolf who had always terrified Jordan. My borders are secure, Thorn. Do not test my patience. Silas's voice boomed, sharp and dangerous. Your borders are secure, but your house is empty. Thorn snapped back. Vivienne humiliated us. You need a strong, pure-blooded female by your side to restore confidence. Alpha Cassandra of the River Run pack is willing to step in. She is fertile, she is fierce, and she will raise your pups as warriors. Jordan froze, her knuckles turning white on the handle of the stroller. Alpha Cassandra, a woman known for her ruthlessness. The thought of handing Leo and Maya over to a woman like that made Jordan's stomach churn with nausea. My pups already have someone looking after them, Silas replied, his voice deadly quiet. An Omega? Thorn spat the word like poison. You let a floor scrubber raise the future king? It is unnatural. She will make them soft. They need a mother with dominance. Marry Cassandra. Silas. Send the Omega back to the kitchens where she belongs. A low, terrifying growl ripped through the air. It was Silas's wolf, completely feral and close to the surface. Speak of her with disrespect one more time, Thorn, and I will tear your throat out here on the cobblestones. The Omega stays. The pups are thriving. And what of your needs, Alpha? Thorn pressed, though his voice wavered with fear. You need a mate. The meeting is over. Silas snarled. Jordan scrambled backward, pushing the stroller as quietly and quickly as she could, terrified of being caught eavesdropping. Her heart was in her throat. He had defended her. The Alpha King had threatened an elder over an Omega, but Thorn's words echoed in her mind. Send the Omega back to the kitchens where she belongs. She was living on borrowed time. Silas was grateful to her, yes. But he was a king. He would eventually have to marry a highborn female to secure his reign, and when he did, Jordan would be discarded. The pain that thought brought was sharp and suffocating, making her realize just how deeply she had fallen not just for the pups, but for the dark, brooding king who came to sit with her every night in the nursery. That evening, Silas arrived later than usual. He smelled of whiskey and deep, simmering anger. He didn't sit in the chair. He paced the floor of the nursery like a caged predator. They want you to marry, Jordan said softly, breaking the heavy silence. She was feeding Leo a bottle, avoiding Silas's gaze. Silas stopped dead, turning to look at her. You heard. It's hard not to, Silas. The whole estate is talking about it. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice professional, detached. If you need to transition the pups to a new Luna, I can start writing down their schedules. Maya likes her formula warmer than Leo. And, before she could finish the sentence, Silas was across the room. He dropped to his knees in front of the chair, his hands gripping the armrests, caging her in. His eyes were blazing gold. The pupils dilated with raw, primal emotion. Stop, he commanded, his voice shaking. Stop talking. Silas, you have a duty to the pack. Damn the pack, he roared softly, his hands moving from the armrests to cup her face. His thumbs brushed over her cheekbones, his touch searingly hot. I don't want Cassandra. I don't want any of them. I look at them and I feel absolutely nothing. Jordan's breath caught. She was drowning in the intensity of his gaze. What? What do you want? She whispered. Silas leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. He inhaled her scent, a deep, shuddering breath. I want peace. I want loyalty. I want the woman who looked at my freezing, dying children and offered them her own body heat without hesitation. He closed his eyes, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. I want my wolf to stop howling every time I leave this room. He didn't kiss her. He didn't claim her. The presence of the baby in her arms kept a sacred barrier between them. But the confession was a branding iron to Jordan's soul. The king was falling for an Omega. And it was going to tear the pack apart. The Winter Solstice Gala was the most important social event of the year in the shifter world. It was a time for packs to reaffirm alliances, flaunt their wealth, and silently gauge the strength of their rivals. Given the rumors surrounding Vivienne's disappearance, Silas's beta insisted that the Blackwood pack throw an obscenely lavish party to project an image of absolute stability. You are attending, Silas told Jordan 2 days before the event. Jordan dropped the towel she was using to burp Maya. What? Silas, no. I'm an Omega. I'm not allowed on the main floor during formal events. The elders will have a stroke. You are attending as the official guardian of the heirs, Silas corrected, handing her a thick black garment bag. The pups are coming down for a brief public viewing to prove they are healthy. I will not trust anyone else to hold them. Jordan opened the bag. Inside was a dress that cost more than she would make in 10 lifetimes. It was a deep, midnight blue silk, a subtle nod to the Alpha's colors with a high neckline, long sleeves, but crafted to drape beautifully over her curves. It was modest enough not to offend, but elegant enough to turn heads. Silas, I can't. They will tear me apart with their eyes. Silas stepped close, lifting her chin with a gentle finger. Let them look. You are under my protection. If anyone speaks a word against you, they will find themselves missing a tongue. The night of the gala, the grand ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland of crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and thousands of white roses. The scent in the room was overwhelming, a clash of expensive perfumes, aggressive alpha pheromones, and the underlying scent of political tension. Jordan stood on the raised dais at the head of the room, flanked by 2 elite guards. The twins were secured in an exquisite, silk-lined double bassinet. Jordan wore the midnight blue dress, her hair pinned up in an elegant twist, her makeup soft but striking. She felt like an imposter. Every eye in the room was darting toward her. The whispering was a constant, irritating buzz in her ears. Look at her. The kitchen rat playing dress-up. I hear she used dark magic to bind the king's wolf. She won't last. Once Vivienne's father hears of this insult, Silas was across the room, trapped in a conversation with Elder Thorn and Alpha Cassandra. Cassandra was stunning, tall, blonde, radiating power and dominance. She placed a possessive hand on Silas's arm, laughing at something he said. A sharp pang of jealousy pierced Jordan's chest, so strong it made her gasp. Her wolf, usually so docile, paced angrily in her mind. Mine, the little Omega wolf whimpered. Suddenly, a man detached himself from the crowd and approached the dais. It was Alpha Rafe of the Southern Claws, a pack known for their cruelty. He bypassed the guards, leaning over the bassinet with a sneer. So, these are the famous runts, Rafe mocked, his breath reeking of bourbon. Small, aren't they? I suppose without a proper mother, they're bound to be stunted. Jordan's maternal instinct eclipsed her Omega submission instantly. She stepped forward, physically blocking Rafe from the bassinet. Do not speak of the Alpha King's heirs in that tone, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Rafe's eyes flashed with anger. An Omega daring to command him? Know your place, bitch, he snarled, raising a hand as if to backhand her. Before Rafe's hand could even begin its descent, the temperature in the ballroom plummeted. The music stopped. The chatter died instantly. Silas crossed the massive ballroom in less than 3 seconds. He didn't shout. He didn't growl. He simply grabbed Rafe by the throat, lifting the massive alpha off his feet with one hand. You forget yourself in my house, Rafe, Silas whispered, but his voice carried to every corner of the silent room. You address the guardian of my children with respect, or you leave this hall in a body bag. Rafe choked, clawing at Silas's iron grip. Silas threw him backward onto the polished marble floor. Get out! The ballroom remained in stunned silence as Rafe scrambled up and fled. Silas turned his back to the crowd, stepping up onto the dais next to Jordan. He ignored the hundreds of staring eyes. He looked only at her, his gaze sweeping over her trembling form to ensure she was unharmed. Are you all right? He asked softly. I'm fine, she breathed. Silas reached out, taking her hand in his. He didn't care who saw. He interlaced their fingers, projecting his aura outward, a massive, suffocating wave of dominance that washed over the entire room, layered explicitly with the scent of Jordan's pine and vanilla. It was a public claim. He was telling every wolf in the territory. She is mine to protect. Alpha Cassandra watched from the crowd, her face twisted in furious humiliation. Elder Thorn looked ready to faint. Silas turned to the crowd, still holding Jordan's hand. The music, he commanded coldly. Resume. As the orchestra nervously picked up their instruments, Silas pulled Jordan gently toward the center of the floor. Dance with me, he murmured. Silas, you can't be serious. They're watching. I want them to watch, he said, pulling her flush against his chest, his hand resting warmly on the small of her back. They swayed to the slow, sweeping waltz. I want them to know exactly who stands by my side. For 3 glorious minutes, Jordan forgot she was an Omega. She forgot the elders. She let herself melt into the Alpha King's embrace, the undeniable pull of a mate bond stirring deep within her soul. But the fantasy was shattered by the sound of the grand ballroom doors, slamming open with the force of a bomb blast. The music ground to a halt. Silas stiffened, his head snapping toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 10 heavily armed warriors from the Eastern Seaboard pack, was Vivienne. She was dressed in blood-red velvet, a smirk playing on her crimson lips. Well, well, the Luna purred, her voice echoing through the deadly silent room. I go away for my health, and I return to find the help wearing my diamonds and dancing with my husband. How utterly predictable. The tension in the ballroom was so thick, it was suffocating. Every instinct in Jordan's body screamed at her to drop to her knees and bare her neck in submission. The Luna had returned. The rightful queen was here. Silas stepped in front of Jordan, fully shielding her from Vivienne's view. His body was rigid, his claws fully extended, his fangs descending over his bottom lip. You have immense nerve stepping foot in my territory, Vivienne. Vivienne slowly walked down the grand staircase, her warriors fanning out behind her. Your territory? Need I remind you, Silas, that my name is on the treaty that unites this pack? I am still the Luna. By pack law, I have every right to be here. You abandoned your children to die in the freezing rain. Silas snarled, his voice a low, vibrating threat that made the crystal glasses on the tables tremble. You forfeited your right to that title the moment you left them to freeze. Vivienne waved a manicured hand dismissively. Oh, please, don't be melodramatic. I left them by the servants' quarters. I knew one of the peons would find them. They needed toughening up. A trial by the elements. It's an old custom. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It was a blatant, horrific lie, and everyone knew it. They were dying. Jordan spoke up. She didn't know where the courage came from, but the memory of the blue-tinged, lifeless babies ignited a protective fire in her chest that burned away her Omega fear. She stepped out from behind Silas, glaring at the Luna. They were minutes away from death. You didn't leave them to be found. You left them to be erased. Vivienne's eyes narrowed into slits. How dare you speak to me, you pathetic little kitchen rat? Silas, silence your pet. Do not speak to her, Silas warned, taking a step toward his estranged wife. You have no power here, Vivienne. I am drafting the severance papers. The alliance is broken. Is it? Vivienne smirked, turning to look at the pack elders. Specifically Thorn. Because I've spent the last 3 weeks speaking with the Eastern Alphas. They are very concerned about the stability of the Blackwood pack. They hear the Alpha King is losing his mind, taking an Omega as a consort, elevating weak pups to the throne. She turned back to Silas, her eyes flashing with triumphant malice. If you divorce me, Silas, you break the treaty. The Eastern packs will declare war. Your borders will be overrun within a week. You will drown this pack in blood, just to keep a floor scrubber in your bed. The elders began murmuring nervously. The threat of an Eastern war was not an idle one. They were a massive, brutal military force. Take me back, Silas, Vivienne commanded, stepping closer. Restore my place at your side. Cast the Omega out, and I will call off my father's armies. We can try for stronger heirs. We can pretend this little lapse in judgment never happened. Silas looked at Vivienne, then at the terrified faces of his pack members, and finally back at Jordan. The weight of the crown was crushing him. A king's first duty was to his people. A war would mean the death of hundreds of innocent wolves. Vivienne saw his hesitation and smiled. Go pack your miserable little bags, Omega. Your 15 minutes of royalty are over. No, Silas said quietly. Vivienne blinked. What? I said no. Silas's voice rose, filled with absolute, unwavering resolve. I do not negotiate with terrorists, and I do not take back traitors. You are no longer my Luna. If your father wants a war, let him come. We will water the pines with Eastern blood. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Elders shouted in protest. Warriors reached for their weapons. And Vivienne's face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. You are insane, Vivienne shrieked. You would destroy your pack for a whore? She is not a whore, Silas bellowed, the sound of his alpha command forcing half the room to their knees. She is the guardian of my heirs, and she has more honor in her pinky finger than you possess in your entire rotten bloodline. Vivienne sneered, her eyes locking onto the bassinet guarded by Silas's men. Fine. If you want war, you shall have it, but by pack law, if I am still your legal wife until the council approves the severance, I demand custody of my children. They are my blood. I am taking them with me. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through Jordan. No, she cried out, rushing back up the dais to stand in front of the bassinet. You can't have them! You'll kill them! Pack law, Silas! Vivienne shouted over the din. Chapter 4, verse 12. A mother retains the right to her offspring until formal severance is granted by the High Council. The council doesn't convene until the spring moon. Hand them over, or you break the sacred laws of the ancestors. Elder Thorn stepped forward, his face pale. She is correct, Alpha. The law is absolute. If you deny her the pups, you forfeit your crown immediately. Silas looked like a man being torn apart on the rack. If he gave Vivienne the pups, she would undoubtedly lose them on the journey home. If he refused, he would be stripped of his alpha title, making him powerless to protect anyone. It was an impossible trap. Vivienne gestured to her guards. Take the runts. The Eastern warriors stepped forward. Silas moved to block them, his claws fully out, ready to fight them all to the death. But it was Jordan who did the unthinkable. She reached into the bassinet, grabbing both babies. And then, she ran. Jordan didn't run out of the ballroom. She ran toward the ancient, circular stone dais in the center of the hall, the Bloodstone. It was an ancient relic used for challenging leadership, a place where sacred oaths and undeniable truths were judged by the moon goddess herself. "Jordan, stop!" Silas yelled, terrified they would strike her down. But Jordan leaped onto the raised stone, clutching the crying pups to her chest. She turned to face the entire room, her brown eyes blazing with a feral, terrifying light that no Omega had ever possessed. "I invoke the trial of the goddess," Jordan screamed, her voice cracking but carrying over the commotion. Dead silence fell over the room. The trial of the goddess was an archaic law, unused for centuries. It stated that if a mother's claim was disputed, the pups themselves, through the blessing of the goddess, would reveal their true guardian. "You stupid girl," Vivian laughed, stepping toward the stone. "You are an Omega. You cannot invoke a sacred trial." "I hold the blood of the king," Jordan shot back. "The law states the guardian may invoke the trial to protect the heirs from a false mother." Elder Thorne looked at a massive, leather-bound tome held by the pack historian. The historian nodded slowly. "The Omega is within her rights. The trial may proceed." "This is ridiculous," Vivian spat. "Fine. Let's get this over with. How does it work?" "The pups are placed on the center of the stone," the historian announced, his voice trembling. "The two claimants stand on opposite sides. The pups, guided by the instinct of their wolves, will crawl to their true protector. If they crawl to the Luna, they leave with her. If they crawl to the Omega," the historian swallowed, "the Luna's claim is permanently dissolved." Silas looked at Jordan in sheer terror. The pups were only 5 weeks old. They could barely lift their heads, let alone crawl. It was a gamble of epic proportions. Jordan looked into Silas's eyes and gave him a single, imperceptible nod. "Trust me." With trembling hands, Jordan knelt and placed Leo and Maya on the cold, flat surface of the Bloodstone. The pups immediately began to wail, unhappy to be separated from Jordan's warmth. Jordan backed up to the left edge of the stone. Vivian, rolling her eyes, stepped up to the right edge. "Come here, you little brats," Vivian snapped, snapping her fingers impatiently. "Come to mother." The pups ignored her, screaming louder. Jordan dropped to her knees. She didn't call out to them. She closed her eyes and tapped deep into her wolf. She released her aura, not just the soft, pacifying scent of an Omega, but the fierce, desperate love she felt for these children. She flooded the stone with the scent of pine, vanilla, and maternal warmth. "I am here," she projected into the quiet space of the pack bond. "I am your safe harbor." The effect was instantaneous. Leo stopped crying. His golden eyes, so much like his father's, locked onto Jordan. With a grunt of effort that seemed impossible for a 5-week-old infant, the tiny boy rolled onto his stomach. He dug his little fists into the stone, his back legs kicking, and began an awkward, agonizingly slow army crawl toward Jordan. "No," Vivian breathed, stepping forward. "That's impossible." "Do not cross the line, Vivian," Silas roared, stepping closer to the stone, his heart hammering against his ribs. Maya, hearing her brother move, let out a sharp bark, her very first wolf sound, and mimicked his movements, dragging her tiny body across the cold slate, following the overwhelming scent of love and safety. The entire ballroom watched in stunned, breathless awe. It took 2 minutes, but to Silas, it felt like an eternity. Finally, Leo's little hand grasped the silk fabric of Jordan's dress. Maya bumped into his side a second later, reaching up to whine at Jordan's knees. Jordan scooped them up, bursting into tears, burying her face in their fine, soft hair. The room erupted. The historian slammed his staff against the floor. "The goddess has spoken. The pups have chosen. Vivian of the Eastern Seaboard, your claim to the heirs of Blackwood is officially, and forever, severed." "This is a trick!" Vivian shrieked, her face purple with rage. "She used dark magic. She drugged them. I demand a recount. I demand." "You have no demands left to make," Silas said. He stepped onto the Bloodstone, his massive frame towering over Vivienne. The terrifying, oppressive weight of his alpha aura slammed into her, forcing her to her knees before the entire court. You are stripped of your title. You are banished from the Western Territories. If I see your face across my borders again, I will not hesitate to rip your heart from your chest. Take your warriors and run, Vivienne. Run back to your father and tell him the Blackwood Pack does not fear him. Vivienne looked around at the faces of the Blackwood elders. Even Thorn looked away in disgust. She had been humiliated by an Omega, rejected by her own children, and cast out by her king. Trembling with fury, Vivienne stood, shooting one last venomous look at Jordan. You will regret this. You will both burn. She turned and marched out of the ballroom, her guards hurrying after her, their tails tucked between their legs. As the heavy doors slammed shut, Silas turned his attention back to the center of the room. The danger had passed, but the tension remained. The elders were still watching him. He still needed a Luna. He still needed a queen. Silas walked over to Jordan, who was still kneeling on the stone, clutching the babies. He dropped to his knees in front of her. He didn't care about the politics anymore. He didn't care about the optics. The trial had forced his wolf fully to the surface, and his wolf recognized only one truth. Silas reached out, framing Jordan's face with his massive hands. You saved them, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You saved all of us. Jordan looked up into his golden eyes, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the raw, unfiltered adoration shining there. I love them, Silas. And I love you. The words rang out in the quiet ballroom, impossible to misunderstand. The collective gasp from the elders was loud enough to be comical. But Silas didn't take his eyes off Jordan. Silas, Jordan whispered, her heart hammering frantically. You can't. The pack will follow my lead. Or they will find a new alpha, Silas said fiercely. He leaned in, his nose brushing against the crook of her neck. He inhaled deeply, bypassing the scent of the pups, bypassing the expensive perfume she wore, seeking the very core of her essence. And then, it happened. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a violently abrupt snap, like a massive chain locking into place deep within his soul. The scent of pine and vanilla intensified 1,000-fold, becoming intoxicating, necessary for his survival. His wolf let out a triumphant, earth-shaking howl inside his mind. Mate. Silas pulled back, his eyes wide with shock and awe. The golden glow of his irises was blinding. Jordan gasped, dropping her forehead against his chest as the same cosmic snap echoed through her. The mate bond, suppressed by her low rank and his forced marriage, had finally shattered the barriers. The connection flooded her veins with liquid fire, binding her soul to the fierce, brooding king in front of her. Goddess above, Elder Thorn whispered, dropping to his knees. The other elders followed suit. You could not argue with a true mate bond. It was considered a direct blessing from the deities. To oppose a true mated pair was heresy. Silas stood, pulling Jordan up with him. He wrapped one arm securely around her waist, the other hand resting over the pups in her arms. He looked out over the sea of his kneeling pack members. Hear me, Silas commanded, his voice echoing with absolute authority. The goddess has judged, and she has provided. She did not send me a warrior to fight my wars. She sent me an Omega with the courage to protect my heart. Jordan is my true mate. She is the mother of your future king and queen. He turned to Jordan, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. I, Silas Vance, Alpha King of the Western Territories, reject my past, he vowed, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register meant only for her, yet amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. I claim you, Jordan, as my equal, my Luna, and my queen. I bind my soul to yours, in this life and the next. Jordan sobbed, a sound of pure, overwhelming joy. I accept, she whispered. I claim you, Silas. My king, my mate. Silas didn't waste another second. He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that scorched the air around them. It was a kiss of possession, of profound relief, and of unbreakable devotion. The pack erupted into a deafening howl of approval, the sound shaking the crystal chandeliers above. The transition over the following months sent shockwaves across the shifter territories. But within the walls of the Blackwood estate, a profound and unprecedented peace settled over the pack. Jordan transformed her new reality. With a quiet, unshakable grace, she refused to hide in the gilded royal wing, instead integrating the servants with the higher-ranking wolves and implementing programs that protected Omegas. Because of their new Luna, no pup in the Western Territories would ever again be deemed weak or discarded. The threat of the Eastern Pack loomed briefly, but as news spread that Silas had found his true, fated mate, blessed by the Bloodstone itself, several powerful neighboring packs quickly pledged their swords to Blackwood. Vivienne's father, realizing his daughter's disgrace had united the West against him, not only withdrew his armies but formally disowned Vivienne, casting her out as a rogue to save his own political standing. For nearly a year, Vivienne became a ghost, a whisper of a threat that slowly faded beneath the joy of Leo and Maya's first steps, their first clumsy howls, and the deepening, fiery romance between Silas and Jordan. Until the first violent storm of the spring thaw, Silas had been called to the northern border to inspect a sudden, suspicious breach in their perimeter. He had kissed Jordan fiercely before leaving, promising to be back before dawn. The estate was heavily guarded, but as the thunder rattled the massive glass windows of the nursery, an unsettling prickle of ice slid down Jordan's spine. Her inner wolf paced nervously, her vanilla scent tinged with the sharp ozone of anxiety. Jordan was rocking a fussy Maya, watching the rain lash against the glass, when the power to the entire royal wing abruptly cut out. The nursery plunged into pitch blackness. A heavy, unnatural silence swallowed the room, broken only by the storm outside. And then, a scent hit Jordan's nose, a smell so putrid and metallic it made her gag. It was the scent of rotting roses and blood. "Vivienne, hush, sweet girl," Jordan whispered frantically to Maya, placing the toddler back into her heavy oak crib next to a sleeping Leo. She didn't scream for the guards. If Vivienne had made it this far into the royal wing, the guards outside the door were already dead. The heavy mahogany door to the nursery creaked open slowly. A flash of lightning illuminated the doorway, casting a long, twisted shadow across the floor. Vivienne stepped inside. She was unrecognizable from the polished, arrogant queen of the Solstice Gala. Her clothes were ragged and soaked in mud. Her face was gaunt, her eyes manic and hollowed out by madness, and in her right hand, she gripped a jagged blade made of pure, deadly silver. "I told you," Vivienne hissed, her voice a raspy, broken thing. "I told you that you would both burn." Jordan didn't cower. The Omega she used to be, the girl who kept her head down and scrubbed floors, had died on the Bloodstone. In her place stood a Luna, bound to the Alpha King, fueled by the primal, ferocious instinct of a mother protecting her young. Jordan stepped squarely between the crib and Vivienne. "You don't belong here. Leave, Vivienne, before Silas rips you apart." Silas is chasing shadows at the border. Vivienne laughed wildly, taking a step closer, raising the silver blade. "My mercenaries are keeping him very busy. By the time he realizes he's been tricked, I will have painted this room with your blood, and then I'll take care of the runts." Vivienne Lunget. She was an alpha by blood, faster and naturally stronger. The silver blade slashed through the dark, aiming straight for Jordan's heart. But Jordan didn't try to match her strength. She dropped fast, the blade cutting a shallow line across her shoulder, and swept her leg out, kicking Vivienne's knee with a sickening crack. Vivienne shrieked, stumbling forward into the rocking chair, smashing it to splinters. "You pathetic bitch!" Jordan didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy, brass lamp from the bedside table and swung it like a baseball bat, connecting hard with Vivienne's jaw. The rogue wolf snarled, recovering with terrifying speed. She tackled Jordan to the floor, her hands' claws fully extended, closing around Jordan's throat. "You stole my crown!" Vivienne screamed, spittle flying from her lips. "You stole my life!" Jordan gasped for air, the silver blade pressing dangerously close to her ribcage. The edges of her vision began to darken. She could hear Leo and Maya waking up, their terrified cries piercing the darkness. "Fight!" her wolf roared inside her head. "Protect them!" Jordan's eyes flashed a brilliant, luminescent gold. The true power of a mated Luna wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Drawing on the immense reservoir of the pack bond she shared with Silas, Jordan unleashed a wave of sheer, concussive dominance. "Get off me!" Jordan commanded, her voice layering with a supernatural, booming echo that physically shook the room. The command hit Vivienne like a freight train, The rogue's eyes rolled back, her hands flying off Jordan's throat as her mind instinctively buckled under the overwhelming authority of a true queen. Jordan seized the moment. She bucked her hips, throwing Vivienne off her. She scrambled to her feet, snatched the silver blade from the floor, and pressed the edge directly against Vivienne's throat before the rogue could recover her senses. "You surrendered your life the night you left them in the freezing rain," Jordan growled, her chest heaving, blood dripping down her arm, looking every inch the fierce ruler the pack needed. "You will never, ever touch my children." Suddenly, the nursery doors blew completely off their hinges. Silas stood in the ruin of the doorway, half-shifted, a terrifying monster of fur, muscle, and fangs, dripping with the blood of the mercenaries he had slaughtered to get back to his mate. His golden eyes swept the room, entirely prepared to tear Vivienne limb from limb, but he froze, his feral growl dying in his throat. He didn't see a helpless Omega needing to be rescued. He saw his Luna standing tall, holding their greatest enemy at blade point, while his pups cried safely in their crib. Jordan didn't look away from Vivienne as Silas approached. "Take her," Jordan breathed, her voice ironclad. "Put her in the darkest cell of the dungeons. Let her rot knowing she was bested by an Omega." Silas's chest heaved with pride and residual adrenaline. He hauled the stunned, defeated Vivienne off the floor by her hair, tossing her to the beta guards who had just arrived in the hallway. Then, Silas fell to his knees in front of Jordan. He pulled her into his massive arms, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the vanilla and pine scent that anchored his soul. "I felt you fight," he choked out, his voice thick with tears of relief. "Through the bond. You were magnificent." Jordan dropped the blade, wrapping her arms around his broad shoulders, holding him just as tightly. "I'm their mother, Silas. Nothing in this world will ever take them from me." One warm spring afternoon, exactly 1 year after the storm that changed everything, Jordan sat on a blanket in the lush, blooming gardens. Leo and Maya, now robust, energetic toddlers, were chasing a butterfly across the manicured lawn, their joyful laughter echoing in the air. Silas approached from behind, dropping his jacket on the grass and sinking down beside her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, pressing a soft kiss to her mating mark, right above her collarbone. Silas looked at his children, the heirs that had almost been taken from him twice, and then down at the woman who had braved both the elements and the blade to save them. He tightened his grip on her, his heart overflowing with a peace he had never thought possible. "Let them run," Silas murmured, resting his chin on her shoulder. "They have the fiercest mother in the world watching over them. They are perfectly safe." Jordan turned her head, capturing his lips in a slow, sweet kiss, the taste of sunshine, and forever lingering between them. The Omega who had lived in the shadows had not just saved the pups. She had saved the king, and in doing so, she had become the greatest Queen Blackwood had ever known. The truest measure of strength is not found in dominance, fangs, or royal bloodlines, but in the quiet, unyielding courage to protect the vulnerable when it costs you everything. Jordan's story reminds us that compassion is the fiercest magic of all, capable of defying storms, breaking curses, and healing the hardest of hearts. Love, when rooted in selfless sacrifice, will always outlast the bitterest cruelty. If this dramatic journey of the Alpha King and his fiercely protective Omega Queen captured your heart, please drop a like, share this story with a fellow romance lover, and hit that subscribe button for more epic, cinematic tales of forbidden love and destiny.